Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
Bob Anthony.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm their guest and friend, Alan Singer.
Welcome again, Dr. Alan Singer, educator, historian. Going to need your perspective on all those levels for this show. And we are taping again another Wednesday before our Monday air date, being brought to you by the good graces of EVT Educational Productions, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and Zoom. And basically this Wednesday is just, it's like a week since these two trials that we're interested in started. We can nail down the actual start date, but that's actually not that important. But these two significant trials that actually has grown out of one being Black in America, jogging while Black, and two, white militia, white grievance or not, or whatever, Second Amendment militia rights for 17-year-olds will prevail or not prevail. Those are the two trials that we're seriously, significantly want to at least put into some kind of perspective. And one is taking place in Kenosha, that's in the state of Wisconsin, correct, guys? And the other one is taking place in Georgia, somewhere outside of Atlanta, correct?
No, it's on the coast, by almost by Savannah.
Oh, okay, near Savannah. Okay, all right. My mea culpa, definitely my bad. For some reason, I had the sense that this was Atlanta related, but no, it's around close to the Savannah area.
Yeah, it's almost Florida on the coast.
It's way down. All right. And so, yeah, background on the Ahmaud Arbery case in Georgia, Raymond. The overview: jogging Black male.
Yes, a jogging Black male running through the streets, who was pursued by three individuals. Who one of the defendants made a statement that he was trapped like a rat. They had decided that he had done something with no proof and pulled a gun. And well, they were armed when they accosted him. And one of the gentlemen had a shotgun, which Arbery tried to, from what I saw in the video, tried to grab from him and was shot in the process. There was an interesting quote from one of the defendants, the father of the shooter, Gregory McMichaels. Excuse me, my allergies are just killing me today. According to a transcript of taken by an officer the day after the shooting, McMichaels was asked, quote, "Did this guy break into a house today?" referring to Arbery. To which McGregory replied, "Well, that's just it. I don't know." That was according to the transcript. He went on to say, "I told what's her name," referring to another female officer that he had spoken to, "Listen, you might want to go knock on doors down there because this guy had just done something that he was fleeing from. He might have gone in somebody else's house." That's what I took away from that. That's the most important thing to me, that a Black man was seen running down the street. So he must have done something because he was running.
Okay, and the other trial in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
The Rittenhouse trial. Well, Mr. Rittenhouse testified today, again claiming self-defense, but he broke down on the stand. He was just out of control.
And the background on that trial was basically this young man from.
Well, this man from another state entered Wisconsin with an automatic rifle in order to, according to him, protect the citizenry. He ended up shooting 4 people because he he claims that he was in fear of his life. Now, I don't remember who two of the people were, but two others, 4 people in total shot. One was a newspaper reporter and the other one was an EMT. So I don't see how he was threatened by their presence in any way, shape, or form.
In both cases, Ray, we have armed people alleging that they were the ones that were under threat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Rittenhouse supposedly went there to protect property.
Whose property? He came from another state.
I'm just saying that was part of what I heard in the earlier accounting of why he felt the need in his state of protecting the public from, quote, I don't know if he used evil deeds or bad deeds.
But
He
what
was
I
a
see,
17-year-old vigilante who had an illegal submachine gun, and he crossed state lines illegally. The gun had been purchased legally, but he had no right to it.
He didn't purchase the gun.
No, he was a
purchased it.
felon from step 1, step 2, step 3.
his mother gave him the gun, didn't she?
No, he had
No.
someone purchase it for him.
Ah,
So he had no right to the gun. It was illegal that he had it in possession. It was illegal that he crossed state lines. He had no authority to be where he was. This was vigilantism at its purest and its most dangerous.
Okay.
And just to
That's
flesh
the other
out,
thing about Georgia. It's also vigilantism at its most dangerous. And that is what we are seeing. And then the vigilantes are claiming they have a right to self-defense. But they were the ones breaking the law. The people had the right to self-defense were the people they were victimizing.
just to flesh it out, the Kenosha case was there was the case of the Black man shot in the back and paralyzed by a Kenosha police officer. So that was Mr. Blake, right?
Mr. Blake.
And then there was a number of protests that followed, including some burnings and actually some serious arson in Kenosha, especially that night. And then Mr. Rittenhouse, this 17-year-old, crosses the state line with the AR-15 and decides that he's going to be part of the property protector group, which makes no sense. Just what you say, Alan, vigilantism to the max.
teenager with a gun feeling as though it's wanting to be a big shot.
Well, there was some early in reports on this kid being in some police academy type training in his younger days or something to that effect.
And
And
make him a policeman.
he was a cadre, cadet, whatever. And what struck me was a report that I read, Ray, you could correct me if I'm wrong, where after he shot those individuals, he turned himself into police on the scene and told them he'd shot somebody, and they told him to go home. They did not say, okay, you stay right here. We need to investigate what you just did to see if any crimes were committed. They just said, go home. In the course of this trial, I'm on what do you used to say, tenterhooks, to see how the prosecutors deal with the initial arrest or lack of arrest, because he would not have been arrested had his mother not turned him into the police in the state where he actually was from. So Alan, talk to me about how police and policing has evolved in cases like this, because you've got a good historical perspective on how this stuff has gone down through the years.
Well, I've been following the Georgia case, the Ahmaud Arbery case, because the 3 perpetrators, 3 white men, are claiming that they were making a citizen's arrest of Ahmaud Arbery because they suspected him of a crime which they did not witness. And they stopped him. They were armed. When he tried to defend himself from attack by 3 armed men, they killed him. They are arguing that because the citizen's arrest was legal, they were entitled to use murderous force as to defend themselves. Now, if the citizen's arrest was bogus, and it was because they didn't witness a crime, his only Ahmaud Arbery's only crime was jogging while black on a rural country road, then they had no right to self-defend. The problem, and one of the interesting things is the law has since been modified, suspended, because the governor of Georgia, a Republican, conceded that it was a Civil War era law that was ripe for abuse. But what we have had in the United States, and I argue it's largely related to race and racism, is the promotion of vigilantism. It dates back to slavery days, where vigilantism was used to terrorize enslaved Africans to prevent them from escaping to freedom. It was used after the Civil War in the South to justify Klan activity and the lynching of thousands of African Americans up until the 1950s. And it has been used since then to justify private security, which has targeted Blacks who they feel don't belong where they are. And we saw that with Trayvon Martin in Florida. We've seen that in other cases in the United States. What worries me, and this is a parallel in both cases, where you have a white vigilante using excessive force to murder people, is in both cases, the juries are overwhelmingly white. In Georgia, 11 of 12 potential Black jurors were knocked off the case because they were perceived of as biased, because they knew about the case and they had opinions. It's unclear to me how they found 11 white jurors who apparently knew nothing about the case and have absolutely no biases about Black people. Apparently they don't see color. So the jury selection was outrageous. And in Wisconsin, they seated 20 jurors as alternates and as regulars, one person of color. I mean, the whole, just as with George Floyd, called into question policing in America, these two trials are calling into question the legal system and whether justice is possible. I'm looking at this and they're both guilty as hell.
Well,
the problem, they're all guilty as hell because it's 3 in 1 case. The problem will be getting a conviction. And I'm looking at this and I can't imagine them getting 11 white people to vote guilty.
okay, we're looking at situations where we know for a fact that the Arbery jury is 11-1. At its best, the Kenosha jury, and I put that 17-year-old, now 18 years old, now that he's on trial, out of my mind, just because bad things my brain won't keep, and that's bad because he put himself where he shouldn't have been and he killed 2 people. So, but anyway, his trial, they've got a jury pool, as you stated, like 20-1. We don't know if that one got seated on the 12-person juror. And so at best, it could be 11-1 in that case as well. At worst, it's 12 white persons dealing with this young man. And I know there are enough Black people in Wisconsin to have at least one person on any given jury. Especially in Kenosha, there are enough Black people to have at least one person on a given jury. But we're not even sure that that's the case. And so the history of the South about excluding Black people from juries is rampant. The Supreme Court talks about exclusion by race makes unconstitutional challenges. But what did the judge say down there in Georgia, Alan? Because I know
so it looks like racism, but they were able to knock them off on other categories.
Okay, he claimed that, yeah, I read where the judge actually said, this looked like a racial exclusionary jury to me. And then he proceeded to lecture about, but it's not in my hands because I was presented with other equally, quote, valid reasons for the jurors being knocked off. And so my hands are tied. I'm not sure if I understand the legal system, which is why I wanted to get one of my legal expert friends on this panel as well, but we'll revisit this again because the trial is still going on. But I always thought if a judge even suspected that, even though he was given bogus reasons, that when the composition of the jury came in, he could just say, no, I'm not sure this is a valid jury based on constitutional challenges. But he claimed he couldn't. Is there room for a possible appeal by the prosecution if these 11 or whatever decide these people are not guilty, even though they're the ones who cornered this young man, quote, like a rat, and shot him when he was trying to defend himself by taking the gun away from the person who was trying to shoot him with it? What am I missing?
The prosecutors can't appeal. The best option will be for the federal government to institute a civil rights violation and bring them up on charges that they, by killing these people, they violated their civil rights. But the prosecutors don't have the ability to appeal if they lose the case.
There's no appeal, Alan, to the high court in the state?
Not by the prosecutors. If they're acquitted, they're acquitted. And they will be subject to double jeopardy if they're brought up on trial again. If there's a hung jury, the prosecutors can bring it up again, but that would require a hung jury.
Yeah. I remember reading something about the double jeopardy part that you just mentioned. I put that out of my head, I guess, but I do remember reading that they can't be retried on that racial exclusionary charge because it'd be double jeopardy.
But Alan, it seems like there's always a legal narrative that works to the favor, of in this case the shooters, because Eric, if you remember way back when the Arbery case was relatively fresh, we had a district attorney, and I had to look it up, in Waycross civil criminal court, who said that Arbery must have been, basically, he must have been crazy to assault somebody holding a gun, and that he was the aggressor. That's what the DA said, and it said it was based on evidence. We've all seen that video. There's no evidence that looks through the truck that can see who charged who, because the guy with the gun started out at the door of the truck, had to work his way in all the way around the truck to the front to meet Arbery. But the DA didn't act, he didn't say that. There's always a legal narrative that somehow works.
You remind me of the fact that one, maybe two DAs in that county where this crime was committed did not press charges against these individuals initially.
This was one of them.
Going to let that crime go unchallenged until that video hit social media. And then the family raised holy hell with and so somebody said, we need to look at this again. And they pushed those first DAs aside. I remember because we covered that on Media Watch back then when it really hit the fan.
Look, Gregory McMichael was a good old boy of the local police. He had been in law enforcement. So they were not looking to arrest him and his son. Although his son Travis was known for posting racist text messages, and Brian, the roadie, acknowledged that Travis McMichael had made racist remarks to the police while he was standing over Arbery's body. So the police and the prosecutors are friends of these guys. And in both Wisconsin and in Georgia, these white murderers are being called heroes for defending Second Amendment rights by white conservatives. I mean,
what do you
it's
have?
a level of outrageousness that's taking place that makes you really wonder. It's not just these men who are on trial, it's the United States and the legal system that are on trial here.
Well, if I remember correctly, Ray, wasn't Ricky Schroeder or some other entertainment Hollywood person raising money for the Kyle Rittenhouse defense? And didn't Rittenhouse get a giant defense fund set up for him by a whole bunch of right-wing militia and a whole
I believe you're right. Those names escape me at the moment, but yes, that's absolutely right. There was a fund set up for him, and I think they got a lot of money.
a number of police officers contributed to that fund, if I remember correctly, when we covered part of that development on Media Watch a while back. So this brings me to the whole bit what you were saying about this white vigilantism, white supremacist, historical, I guess, sea or bedrock or whatever that the judiciary, the judicial system in this country has been walking on, swimming in, whichever metaphor we want to use. And so this all came out of, at least the Rittenhouse trial came out of what was going on in the country as a result of George Floyd's murder, and Blake's shooting came on the heels of George Floyd's murder. And so Kenosha went up just like any number of cities where people were protesting. And because of this same unrest that broke out when people said, enough is enough, we're tired of Black people getting killed by white people for no reason, whether they're law enforcement white people, whether they're 17-year-old vigilante wannabe, whatever. These demonstrations basically ended up getting a whole lot of pushback because the Republicans decided they had something, law and order, our cities are falling apart, et cetera, et cetera. And then on top of that, here comes this guy that we profile. His name just escapes me. The guy who took the critical race theory brouhaha that started on a low platform, low profile, and he went to one of these conservative conventions and said, this is your stalking, no, your club. This is the key to you motivating your base to turn all this, quote, progressive agenda around, because they're indoctrinating your kids in school and they're calling it critical race theory. And of course it was a lie because they weren't teaching critical race theory in any of these schools. But Alan, historically, anytime we try to teach history properly, because that's your field, history.
Yes.
Anytime we come out with a 1619 project, anytime we come out with Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home, whatever, where we try to put a perspective on how American history truly unfolded, by trying to teach that, what happens? All of a sudden, people get up in arms and say, no, that's not our country. That's not who we are. Tell us about this ongoing battle about teaching history properly, because you've written a number of pieces on what we're up against, on how to fight back in the educational arena.
Well, critical race theory in its modern iteration was developed as a legal strategy in the 1880s, 1890s, 1980s, 1990s, used by academics. It doesn't appear in any curriculum in the United States. Social studies, English teachers try to teach kids to take a critical perspective of events and texts. Now, part of the issue here is that Republicans and right-wingers have constructed a straw man that they could use to rally white people who are upset about what is taking place in the nation. But the reality is, no one can document any place in the United States where critical race theory forms the curriculum. Now, what's interesting, while they're attacking people, the left and African Americans for voting critical race theory, in the 19th century, critical race theory was the basis of white racism. So that in the Dred Scott decision in the 1850s, the Supreme Court could decide that Blacks had no rights under the United States Constitution because they are using critical race theory in reverse. So this is just a way of reacting to the Black Lives Matter movement. It's a way of reacting to the demand for equal rights, for decent treatment, for people not getting murdered. You know, I've used a critical race theory lens in some lessons I've developed. But what happens is if you look at the history of race, you see things very differently. You know, one of the lessons I did, and with middle school kids, is what did Thomas Jefferson purchase in 1803? And everybody was, oh, he purchased Louisiana. Well, the problem is Louisiana didn't belong to France. There were thousands of indigenous people who lived there who never heard of France and didn't recognize France's claim. So the United States purchased France's claim to land that belonged to other people. Now,
And we have about a minute left.
That's a critical perspective on history. You want to call it critical race theory? You can, but what we're doing is we're looking at history. We're not teaching theories to kindergarten kids.
Yeah, the critical race theory thing, the stuff that I read on it, Derek Bell and a couple of other legal scholars actually framed the way the legal jurisprudence was being practiced and being taught in this country. And so it's a law school actual
Yes.
Course and way of teaching law and looking at the law. And that's what they have decided to lump under this umbrella. Terry McAuliffe basically lost his election, not just on critical race theory, but that was the dog whistle that they used to put the umbrella of, we don't want masks, we don't want vaccinations and all that. We got to
okay, and we're about 15 seconds.
We got to revisit that. And so this has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on Twitter and YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
Alan Singer, thank you for having me tonight.
Folks, stay safe. We'll catch you the next time.